go ahead and move into our presentation and conversation with the director of Caltrans, Toks Omishakin. For those of you who don't know Toks, he was appointed the 33rd director of the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans. His vision for California features a safe, sustainable, and multimodal transportation system that builds on strong local partnerships. Here's the part that's absolutely amazing to me, so pay attention to this. As director, here's what he does. He manages a $15 billion budget and nearly 21,000 employees who oversee 50,000 lane miles of highways, maintain 13,000 bridges, provide permitting of more than 400 public use airports, fund 3 of Amtrak's busiest intercity rail services, and provide transit support to more than 200 local and regional transit agencies. That's a lot. Before joining Caltrans, he worked at the Tennessee Department of Transportation for 8 years to make TDOT one of the best DOTs in the country. And prior to that, he served as Director of Healthy Living Initiatives in the Nashville Mayor's Office. He also has a mountain bike, which he enjoys riding into the Caltrans headquarters daily, although perhaps these days it's not daily. We'll have to ask him about that. So with that, I am assuming that Toks is with us. Toks, are you there?
I am. Can you see me?
We can.
Okay, good. Good morning.
Good morning. You are in an office. Did you ride your bike there today?
No, this is the virtual background. It looks pretty good.
You fooled me.
No, this is the Zoom background that we use in the office. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to hand things off to you if you want to give us a presentation, and then we'll have a little banter between us once you're done.
Yeah, I would love that. That's the part that I really look forward to is the conversation. And so if people have questions for me, I would prefer that than actually doing the talk that I'm about to do, but glad to do it. By chance, do you have a PowerPoint presentation?
I believe we do.
Okay.
Deanna, do you have something to share?
No.
Oh.
I'm not sure if we received a presentation. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Why don't you just go ahead and comment and then let me know, and then we can get to the banter part.
Okay, let me just talk through some of the things that I was going to share, and then would love to get to the Q&A part, because that's what I enjoy most anyway. So I've been in the role now for roughly 10 months. I think starting in October of 2019. Part of what intrigued me in making the decision to come here from Tennessee was some of the things that you just outlined. One, the breadth of the responsibility here. It's quite unique. You can imagine other states having big departments of transportation, but nothing quite like California out there. And so with that, the breadth of that responsibility, and then an administration that was very much into some of the things that I've worked on my entire career. Some of the things that you mentioned a little bit, but just focusing on sustainability and building a transportation system that was multimodal, focusing on issues related to smart growth, climate change. In my prior responsibility in a state like Tennessee, you can imagine a little bit of the politics. We really didn't talk about those things. I worked on issues related to equity and smart growth and climate change, but it was all under the disguise of other issues. It had to be under talking about the economic impact that those things made. I couldn't, rightfully come out and say, hey, we need to think about equity and investing in that way. So when I had this opportunity, even though it's going to be a challenge, especially for my family. That's been the hardest, the biggest part of this, moving a family 2,200 miles to California. But there was the opportunity to make a difference at this level, at this scale. I decided to seize that opportunity, to seize the moment. But, you know, in starting in the job, I took a little bit of time to work with the executive team to try to figure out, okay, where are some of the areas that we have a lot of promise, and we've done really good work, and what are some of the areas where we have deficiencies, like where are we falling short? And so after, you know, 2 months roughly, I would say, was able to come up with 5 priorities for the organization, for Caltrans. And we're the second largest department in California state government. And so I said, okay, what are those things that we're going to focus on? So narrowed it down to 5 priorities. We have a strategic plan. We have a long range plan that also helps guide the direction that we move in. But the 5 priorities are, number one, and I'll go through these, and we can shift to sort of having a conversation. Number one is safety. In this state, there are more people that die on the transportation system in this state than any other state in the country. So every single day in California, 10 people die using our transportation system. That makes no sense whatsoever that's the case. And at least 2 or 3 of those people, 2 to 3, are people who are walking or biking every single day in the state. Something that it's just, I just can't, I can't wrap my mind around how numb sometimes we become to that, and how we seem to normalize it. But you know, some cities recently have made, and I'm going to reference European cities here a couple of times. Some cities have made some changes here. Number one, if you think big picture about safety, the country that I like to compare us to in size and scale a little bit is England. England is a country of 55, 56 million people. California is 40 million people. In England, roughly 1,700 people die on the transportation system annually, 1,700. In California, which is 40 million people, 3,600 people roughly every year. So we have twice as many people as England. Now, it's not a fair apples to apples comparison, because England obviously more dense, in their major cities, they have more transportation options like rail, and even walking and biking is more common there. But those are standards we should be shooting for. Like, why can't we reduce our numbers like they did? And another example, when we talk about shooting for 0 deaths or towards 0 fatalities, Helsinki and Oslo, you may have seen this recently in some reports that came out within the last several months. They were able to get to 0 fatalities for pedestrians and cyclists in Helsinki and Oslo in Norway. So some people say, well, why are you talking about this whole towards 0 death thing? What's that all about? I mean, it's too aspirational. It can't be done. These were cities that have 50 and 60 people dying annually walking and biking, and they were able to completely eliminate it. So this is something that can be done. It very much can be done, but it takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of attention. So number one priority for us is absolutely safety. We need to start driving down the numbers, lack of a better word, bringing down the numbers rather, of people who are involved in serious injuries and fatalities on the transportation system in the state. Number 2 on the priority list is multimodalism. We, as a state, have to continue to diversify how people and goods move about. If we're going to solely focus on the highway network as the only means for people to be able to get about, we're going to continue to struggle with getting our transportation system to that next level. And we know all the sort of ancillary impacts that we have when we invest in multimodal transportation, whether it be rail, whether it be walking, biking, everything from air quality, from economic growth, economic development, health benefits. So that's where we need to grow more, not continuing to build big new giant highways across the state. We have some legacy projects that are on the books already. Some of those projects will need to get built out, but the future for transportation in California is not investing in big new highways. We have to maintain, we have to continue to maintain and operate better the existing network we have. We have to do a better job of that. And SB1 it has been a great platform to launch from to do more of that. But what we really need to start to invest more in is more multimodal opportunities for people and goods and freight to be able to move about the state of California. So multimodal is number two. Number three, efficiencies. You mentioned our budget. You mentioned the responsibility we have. One of the things that we have to do is, despite how large we are, we're $15.5 billion agency, we can't rest on our laurels and say, oh, we've just got money all over the place. It's not the case, especially when things like what we're experiencing right now today happens, where there's a downturn. So we have to do a better job of becoming more efficient. With SB1, part of the law required that we save $100 million, find $100 million in savings every single year. This last year, we were able to identify $233 million in savings, but we have to continue to do that in every part of our work, not just in projects, but in the way we do business in-house. We have to continue to find ways to be efficient. And that ties directly into number four, innovation. Innovation. Again, an organization like ours has been around for 100 years, 100 plus years. It changed its name to California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, in the 1970s. So that name's been around for a little over 40 years. But we can't not continue to evolve as much as we possibly can with the things that are going on around us when it comes to innovation. So I like to call California the innovation capital of the world, because right here in California, in our backyard here in this region, you've got everything from Tesla to Apple, Lyft, all these major companies that are like changing the globe, changing technology, Silicon Valley, this platform, which is right about Silicon Valley. We have to embrace Caltrans. We have to embrace all those the innovations happening around us. But it doesn't just mean creating something new. One of the things that we, from a creating something new standpoint, one of the things that we did was recently, last week actually, we announced that a highway 162 in Oroville, California, we paved a 1,000-mile section of that highway with recycled plastic bottles. Something that is completely innovative, 100% recycled material. And we've gotten a lot of kudos for it, but part of the reason why we did it is because through research, through trial and error, we found out that that form of material lasts 2 to 3 times longer than regular asphalt. So, I mean, the benefits of taking this approach from, the reduction in the amount of asphalt that's being hauled that are going to be, polluting the air, to actually taking plastic that ends up in water, in waterways or ends up in landfills, and using that to actually recreate a product that we need. I mean, doesn't get any better than that. But I don't want our staff to be completely locked in on big things like that, big multi-million-dollar changes like that. The innovation we need can sometimes be found right in the simple processes we have in a department every day. It doesn't have to be this big new creation, just inventing a new process to do work. For example, I was on a panel yesterday and we talked about how just signing documents virtually have been like a lifesaver for so many people. Just an Adobe stamp to be able to click on something that says, oh yeah, that's my signature now. We've been doing that for years when we sign, if you buy a house and you're not close to, you're not close to the real estate agent. They've been doing that for over a decade now, where you can sign DocuSign, essentially your agreement. You don't have to actually be there. But in the government space, doing something like that, it's like, oh no, that's taboo. I mean, somebody's going to be fraudulent about that. But something that's simple, how much time that saves from moving the paper around from buildings to buildings, departments to departments, to just be able to click a button and sign. I mean, those are simple things that, from a process standpoint, are very innovative, and we need to embrace throughout the department. And finally, on the list, number 5 is partnerships and stakeholder engagement. To me, that's the nucleus, that's the center of everything we do. We should never plan for something. We should never build anything. We should never construct anything without really thinking about who the project's going to impact and having a dialogue with those people, whoever they may be, whether it be a neighborhood group, whether it be a business entity, a fellow state organization, a federal organization, without sitting down and trying to figure out, okay, how's this going to impact you? So we have to truly be intentional about engaging people and working through a true partnership before we can move forward on anything. So partnerships and stakeholder engagement is the 5th and final priority or pillar. I'll say this real quick, and I'll hand things back over to you. The last 10 months have really forced me to really think about the responsibility that we have in this space. I've asked myself several times in the last several months, would I have still done this if I knew this was going to happen? If I knew injustice and equity issues were going to rise to the point that they have and become the light being shone on it as much as it has? Would I have also done this if I knew COVID was going to be what it is? There was a period before my family got here where I had to fly to Tennessee in the middle of the pandemic several times because I just couldn't imagine much leaving. I went a period of about 6 weeks at one point without seeing my family because of the shelter in place. And the weird thing is, I still somehow feel like I would have done it because despite what I call the 3 pandemics, the COVID pandemic, the injustice and equity pandemic, and the economic part as well, the fact that people are losing their jobs, despite that fact, one of the things that I'm very hopeful for is that when we look back in 5 to 10 years, very hopeful for this, that we will be able to say, I'm glad I was of service during that period. There are many industries that have been impacted by what we're going through, and they've had to shut down. If you work in retail, if you work, in a mall or something like that, they're filing for bankruptcy. They're shutting down. But we in this sphere, we've been called to duty to stand up during this time and be of service to people across the state and across the country. And so fortunate that I believe we have been called to duty. And hopefully we look back in 5 to 10 years, a lot of us in what we do, whether even if you're in the private sector, but hopefully we look back and we're able to say, I'm glad I was around to make a difference during such a tumultuous period. Thank you. How do I say your name? Is it Shiloh?
Yep, Shiloh. One of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War that took place in Tennessee.
Yes, I know a little bit of history. Yes. Yeah.
So I actually want to just, there's lots of questions, and I want to get to a few of those in the limited amount of time that we have. with you, but you were just talking about the three big changes, and I'm wondering if you had a vision for transportation pre-pandemic, equity being a bigger issue for the mainstream, and the economy. I'm wondering if you can comment on whether and how that's changed. What's changed in terms of your vision for here's what the ideal transportation ecosystem needs to look like.
That's a very good question. Not much has changed, except the fact that there's a more keen belief in those issues, those priorities, than before. Especially when it comes to the core transportation part of it. So when you think about, for example, the multimodal side, while we're having this discussion, the walking, biking, transit side of it, the need to invest in that seems more apparent than ever. So not that anything has necessarily changed, but the fact that we should even place even more emphasis on it is what's been more apparent. So I mean, for example, when you think about the injustice part of issues, the equity part of it, we spent 50, 60 years, maybe I'm going too far with it. I'd say the first 20 to 30 years of investing in transportation, we were building big freeways, big interstate freeways through communities that were communities of color, that were underserved communities already. And we blasted through those communities and dismantled them with freeways. As we sort of go back now and sort of rethink how we invest in transportation, we know the errors and the ills that we made in the past, and part of reconnecting those communities that we did a lot of damage to is investing in walking and biking back in those same communities to reconnect those communities. So it's actually just made us even more, the focus on those issues more important. COVID is another, and if you switch to the COVID side, when all this happened, people said, I'm not getting on a bus, I'm not getting on a rail. And we actually discouraged it because we didn't want people gathering in places. So we in the government said, you can't do that. So how are people gonna get to work if they still have a job? If you don't have a car, you're probably gonna try to walk somewhere, you're gonna try to bike somewhere. I mean, so again, even more, the emphasis even becomes more increased during a period like this.
Sorry, fumbling with my unmute button. I'm going to turn it over to Emma to bring in some of the questions that we've gotten in the chat. So Emma?
Yeah, thank you so much, Director, for being here with us. So first question is about SB 127, which was vetoed by Governor Newsom. What would have been your recommendation to the governor on that bill, and maybe how is Caltrans working around that veto anyway?
That's a good question. So I have some interesting beliefs about the role that legislation plays in things like what we're talking about. I think legislation definitely has its place. There's no doubt that legislation forces you to meet certain requirements, and you start to, because it's the law, you start to have to work towards what those requirements are. But what I really believe, if you look at places across the country that are companies across the country, organizations across the country that are known as great places to work and great places to want to be a part of, it's not done. Those great places to work or those great places to live, and a lot of stuff happens through culture, and not necessarily being forced into doing that. It's people help create a place where people want to be, and whereas 127 could have really forced Caltrans into doing some things, I really want help get our people to understand more why. And there are great people that work at Caltrans who get this stuff already, but it hasn't completely permeated the organization. And we just have to get more people to understand why we need to do this instead of I'm being forced to do this. Because if you understand more and more why, this becomes something that becomes just a part of how you do business. And so I believe there's a role for, regulation like SB 127. But for me, at least as a practitioner, I'm not a lawyer, not on the legislative or judicial side. But I really think the focus for me is to help create an environment where people understand why, and it becomes a part of how we do business. And so I think there was a second part to it. I don't want to get too long-winded on this because I know there are probably a lot of questions, but we've redone our action plan and the department that guides how we're going to do work on active transportation. We're reinvesting. Our shop has $100 million that's been set aside in the shop for active transportation. So there's several steps that we're taking within the department.
Thank you. And so here in Silicon Valley, we have a lot of roads like El Camino Real, Woodside, many others that are state highways. And people often hear from the city staff that, oh, well, we need Caltrans approval for that. It's really hard to work with Caltrans. So what would you suggest for our local cities and residents on the best way to work with Caltrans to get, better bike facilities and walking facilities on those state highways?
Yeah, if we were a little bit smaller, I would say send all those emails to me, but I can't. I can't possibly do that. Work with the district director. Our district directors are more locked in on this issue probably than they've ever been before. They know it's not only a priority for me, they know it's a priority for the administration. CalSTA, the governor's office, everybody knows that on our team, especially the leadership team, they know for sure that this is a priority. So if it gets to them, they should be able to help work towards a solution. It may not always be a yes slam dunk, but our team at the senior level very much is aware of how important this is. This is a priority area. So that's what I would encourage.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And I will say that there's also some great bike and pedestrian coordinators in our district, District 4, that have been really helpful in navigating the system as well.
Yeah, you're actually very fortunate. Tony Tavares, the district director, and his team, I mean, they've got some really innovative people in this space on active transportation. So definitely work with those coordinators. And if you're getting stuck, work with the district director.
Let's see, some of these we've kind of answered. I mean, how does the Department of Transportation plan to change with the pandemic, and what are things that you're thinking of now that, might be shifting with everything going on?
Ask that question one more time, Emma. How are we going to shift with everything that's going on? Is that?
Yeah, with the pandemic and the change in transportation patterns and things like that.
Well, I mean, there's several sides to that response. I'll try not to be too long-winded, but I mean, for us internally, one of the things that we have to do, sometimes we can be a very rigid organization. We only had like 200 people roughly in the whole department that were teleworking in February. And within a matter of a week and a half, roughly, we had to get to 13,000 people teleworking for Caltrans of the like 15,000 people that were eligible to telework. So if you can imagine what those hurdles were like to get to that place, everything from setting up VPNs to buying, iPads, laptops. I mean, it's just a significant shift there that we had to make. But when we did make it, one of the things that we want to make sure was, can we still be efficient in delivering on our responsibilities? And we found out that we still could do that, not without bumps and hurdles. We definitely had some, but we found out that we could, and we clearly know the benefits of what we're doing. I in particular, I telework 3 days a week. I mean 2 days a week. I'm in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesday and Thursday, I telework. And by the way, I do ride a hybrid bike to work pretty much 4 to 5 days out of the week. But that's one of the things we found out is just, even more so the benefits. We saw how clean the air, we knew how clean the air was when traffic dropped 40%. And so one of the things we're going to have to sort of work into long-term, how we do business is how to get people to telework more, to telecommute. It's just going to have to be a part of how we, because the benefits are just there. They're so clear, but we have to make sure we can still be proficient in delivering on our responsibilities. So that's more of an internal view, not necessarily on what the question may have been about, which is how does it change how we do our work? But I think I answered a little bit of that primarily.
Yeah, thank you. We are running out of time. We've actually gone over, but this is so good. And I want to end on one final question and also alert the folks who are tuning in that we're skipping our first break because this is just so good and the conversation is so rich. But I'm wondering if you could just comment on, now that you've been working on opposite sides of the country, which are two very different places. If you can just, your high-level observations about what was going on in Tennessee that we could learn from here, and then what was missing in Tennessee that we can say, oh, hey, we do that really well here.
Oh wow, you're totally putting me on the spot. I'm gonna sound like I'm whining and complaining, probably as I respond to this. But let me just talk about, if I could quickly, what I think some of the advantages here are, and what I saw in Tennessee as well. The advantage here really is, despite people's perspective that California is this very monolithic, very left of center state. It's actually a very diverse state. I've come to find out. I've spent a little bit of time in the southern part of the state, in Orange County, in San Diego. Obviously, I'm here in Northern California. I've been in the Bay a lot. So it's quite diverse, more diverse than other states I've been to. But I think the two things that I've really liked about how things sort of work here, one I mentioned already, is I think there's just a lot of will and interest in people to do to work on issues related to some of the things that I really think are important. Now, again, it's not just like everybody agrees and everybody's on board. We're all singing Kumbaya holding hands. I know that's not the case. But issues around the climate, issues around the environment, multimodal transportation, active transportation, equity, all these things that I think that are, even before what we're going through today, that I just really felt were so important. The state has just very much embraced, and it's sort of been a part of how people do things here in the state. And outside of that political realm, one of the advantages of this state is, believe it or not, I'm sure you know this already, it's the topography here, the environment here. I took my family to Lake Tahoe. They had never been to Lake Tahoe. We took them there this last weekend, and we went hiking. You can just tell, because they've been like, what's this whole California thing about? Like, we're leaving the comforts of place to place we've been for for me and my wife for more than a decade to come here. So there's so many advantages to the environment here that it's mind-boggling, the number of outdoor spaces you can walk into, enter into, and really enjoy. In Tennessee, again, I mentioned this before, some of these issues you can't really focus on outright that I mentioned already. You just can't, because there's not a lot of interest, and so you're fighting uphill a lot. And I actually, for some reason, enjoyed that because it forced me into a place to be more artful and tactful about my approach, because I knew when I was walking in the room, a lot of times most people weren't going to agree with me. They were going to be like, what are you talking about? And so I developed some skills over the years in working in leadership roles there to be able to navigate those rooms where nobody looked like me, and for sure nobody would agree with some of the things that I had to say. So that was a little bit of the experience there. But from the people standpoint, one advantage I will say that they have over there is, I'm sure you've heard the term Southern hospitality. When I moved here, and I'm just being very honest and frank about this, when I moved here, I walked to work for the first, because I only live 2 miles away from the office. I live right. Probably for the first 5 weeks, I walked to work every single day before I switched to my life. And I was intentionally looking for opportunities to engage people. I'm weird in that sense. And people would look at me and look the other way. People would not engage in any way whatsoever. And sometimes I can be very intimidating sometimes to some people, I think. But in the South, it was almost like the norm to walk into a place, into a grocery store, and you didn't know the person at all, and they would say hello. I mean, it's just like the norm. And in some parts of the country, people think something's wrong with you. Like if I saw you, Shiloh, and I said, "Hey, Shiloh," well, I wouldn't know your name, and we'd never met, and I just said, "Hi, how are you?" You'd be like, "Hey, what's wrong with him?" That's weird. But that's how people live. And sometimes it really didn't even matter gender or ethnicity. People would just, I mean, it's just almost kind of like a Southern charm. It's a part of how things work. So us growing that as a culture here would be something to, and I know it's a long start, but it starts with one person. But I think it's something that we can embrace, especially in a time like this where we're all struggling with so many different issues. We can have a mask on and still say hi to people. And Tennessee has great outdoors as well, by the way. The Great Smoky Mountains, the most visited national park in the country. But it was 3 hours away from where I was in Nashville, whereas Lake Tahoe is an hour and 30 minutes from me now. So real quickly, Carl Guardino is the man. I just want to say that. He's the CTC commissioner. He is the man. So.
And so do you know that he was my boss for 14 years?
I did not know that. I know he was a part of this organization.
Yeah, he's on our executive advisory board because he's an avid cyclist. But then I also worked for the leadership group for 14 years, so I learned a lot from Carl Guardino. So
he is the man. He's been so kind to me since I moved here.
Oh, so. Good. Yeah. Good. That's awesome. Well, on that note, and I think that's a great note to transition to our first breakout session.